Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Frank Bazzani back again. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. It's been a good weekend so far. I'm glad to sit down and kind of catch up and talk about what we've been up to.
Nice, excellent. Yeah, we joked about it because we had you back on for this show as well as that D Plus show to kick off our summer Star Wars stuff, and then we suddenly didn't have you back on for Empire Strikes Back on Friday of that D Plus show, and so I joked on that show like Frank left again as quickly as he came back. So I'm glad we were able to get you back on at least for this as a more recurring kind of thing here. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about some of our early general and 3 impressions so far. We're recording this Sunday afternoon, so E3 announcements aren't completely through. We'll still have Nintendo stuff to look forward to here in the next couple days, but we'll have kind of our top level thoughts so far, as well as thoughts on In the Heights, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Hey there, everyone. Future Trevor here, just letting you know we don't actually get to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart in this episode. We ended up going much longer on the E3 reactions than I anticipated, and Frank had a hard out. He had to go pick up a friend from the airport, so we didn't quite make it to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I will circle back and talk about that on next week's show. So just wanted to pop in here at the top and give you the heads up that we're not actually going to discuss that one this week. Before we dive into any of that, though, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like all of our wonderful Patreon producers. Let's dive in first, just kind of into our general E3 thoughts. I guess, Frank, let me know like what we talked a little bit before we started recording, but let me know kind of where you've been at with E3 this weekend so far. What conferences have you watched? Has there been anything that has really jumped out at you and stood out?
Yeah, so it's been kind of exciting just to have E3 back, which in a weird way, like I didn't necessarily anticipate, and I don't know if it's necessarily because of E3, or if it's just good to have everybody back in kind of one weekend, all kind of culminated together,
Mm-hmm.
or week, I guess. But I started off with the Summer Games Fest, which was kind of the big kickoff for everything. I ended up watching that entire conference, and I really liked that one. That was still one of my more favorite ones out of this weekend, especially with Jeff Keighley hosting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously, like, I think he really gets it. And now that he has like full reign to do his own thing without people trying to like mess with him, I think he can really do some cool stuff. I think it'll only get better in the future. But of course, I mean, it's amazing that he pulled in Elden Ring, right? Like nobody thought it would be possible, and not because of Jeff Keighley, but just I don't think anybody thought
Just
Elden Ring would be a thing. Like,
yeah, or because Bandai Namco has their own show that they're
true,
doing this weekend as well. So or in the next day or two. So it's like, well, they're not going to give away their biggest, most anticipated thing to Jeff's show. They'll save that and hold that for their own thing. And so maybe they'll have a deeper dive into it on their own thing. But yeah, the fact that like he had that as kind of the closer, as one of the most like clamored for things, that was a big moment for him. I had forgotten that I had watched that one because I had that one basically like in the background while I was working and stuff. Um,
yeah.
because for the most part, I skipped most of the Friday stuff just because of the day job. Um, so yeah, that one kicked off. I thought that one started strong with
Mm.
the Tiny Tina Wonderland's announcement, and then ended strong with Elden Ring, and then like so much of the middle of that just like is forgettable, and I've it's already like here we are 2 days later, and I don't remember really any other big things from it, which is kind of how I feel about most of Jeff's shows.
Mhm.
I've talked about that in the past about like the opening night live that he does for Gamescom stuff. Like the first year, the biggest announcement that I remember from that was basically that Insomniac got bought by Sony in the middle of it, and so that was not like a Games Fest or an opening night live announcement or whatever. That was just like breaking news at the same time that Jeff's show was going on, and he like made mention of it. Because other than that, it was like, oh, here's Jeff in Death Stranding, Cool.
Yay.
And yeah, I guess we did have Kojima show up here again to kind of continue that trend and announce Death Stranding for PS5, but which I
Which that
also
was super weird.
yeah, that was weird. And then like I made the joke online of like because it's like Death Stranding director's cut, and I was like, how was the original game not a director's cut? Like there's so much of just Kojima, unfettered Kojima in that game. Like who is like keeping him from like putting things in the game? It's his game, his studio this time around. So yeah, I was like I still don't understand that, but okay. Anything from that one that really jumped out at you apart from Elden Ring?
Oh man, I'm kind of with you though, because obviously I agree with a lot of what you said, and it did kind of lull in the middle. And I did honestly, even talking about it now, I forgot a ton of what was there. I mean, obviously Tiny Tina's was cool to see. That's one we'll probably play, I assume. Like, I'm not like overly hyped for it, but it's Borderlands. Like, I'll go back.
It's
I'll shoot and loot. Like,
Yeah, if they, I mean, if they, especially because they're clearly going for the like the Tina's, dungeon
Assault
keep.
on Dragon Keep.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
the DLC from Borderlands 2, they're going for that aesthetic and that vibe, and that is, up there. Like I talked last week or a couple weeks ago about how like the Citadel DLC from Mass Effect is my like number one favorite DLC, but like the Tiny Tina's like Borderlands 2 DLC is like in the upper echelon running for like number two or three or something like that. So like I love the humor of it, and if they can like nail that in a way that isn't just the fart and poop jokes that we talked about a little
And
bit,
Blood Stallion
and
and all that.
yeah, with like where Borderlands is now, like I hope we can do that. And even like they even had like Butt Stallion, introduced as Her Royal Highness or whatever. So it's like if they can kind of keep that element of it, I'm tentatively excited for that. Also, the fact that they announced like Andy Samberg and Wanda Sykes and like a upper echelon of like actors as their voice cast, as opposed to the voice acting mainstays of video games. That
Mm.
I'm particularly interested in to see like how they fit in with the vibe. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. And so then moving on from Summer Game Fest, what else?
Yeah, so after Summer Games Fest, I ended up watching the Day of the Devs,
Hmm.
because of course it's as I think I've mentioned before on some shows, like I'm a huge Double Fine and I am 8-Bit fan. So when it's Double Fine and Cross I am 8-Bit presents Day of the Devs, I was like, all right, yeah. That was another one that kind of surprised me because I didn't really know what to expect going in. I mean, I knew it was going to be indie games, so I'm pretty sure I actually have watched these in past years, possibly. I just don't really recall. I think they did it in past years. I'm pretty sure they streamed it last year too, like online.
Yeah, last year I think they stream it. Typically, it's like a game.
It's like an
It's a
in-person,
GDC kind of
yeah,
thing, actually,
yeah.
where yeah, it's like the devs coming together, and I'm pretty sure like the last few years in San Francisco, they like rent out the Alamo Draft House for a couple nights or something like that, and they basically like have the devs show off their games on the big screen and talk about the games in front of other devs and a few media people. So I think last year was probably the first time we got like it really open to the public, but like the media has often been out there talking about these are the cool games I saw at the Day of the Devs. Because yeah, I think it's more I certainly more closely associate it with GDC than with
Mm,
E3, but obviously GDC once again didn't happen this year, so or if it did, it
yeah.
was like a digital only thing, and so this kind of got its own spotlight. Um, yeah, I saw a couple games that were shown off in that, and that like especially look really cool. Like there's one that was what like a stop motion animation kind of game where
Yeah.
this guy is just doing like the modeling and the animation in different lighting environments, so that when they put it into the game in different lighting scenarios, it will like apply. And I was like, that looks really cool, and good lord, that's like got to be a ton of work.
And that one also, if you notice, no date.
Oh yeah, of course not.
Like no date. Just like
Yeah.
look at this beautiful game I'm making. Like,
That I mean, yeah, that
um,
like that jumped out at me as like immediately I thought of like Cuphead originally when like we first started seeing Cuphead, and they were like, yeah, no, we're doing like hand drawn cell animation kind of stuff, and like that's how we're making this game. I was like, oh god, that is going to take forever to come out. So, but still, like it's cool that it's like it has gone out there and like made its mark now as like the stop motion animation kind of you know platformer or whatever it is, And so like when we see from that again in years to come, or if it's at a PAX or something like that, it'll be like, oh, that's cool, that's the game I remember from Day of the Devs.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there, because there was a lot of really cool indie games there, and that's why I had like there was a lot I hadn't heard of, and some of them were probably obviously revealed for the first time. But like there was this game, I think it's called like Tome, and you kind of take like photos, and it kind of like
Yeah.
turns into real life, which that looked really cool. There was also, I believe that was the conference that Unbeatable was at, which is kind of that like anime music kind of beat rhythm game is what
Hmm.
I'm looking for. That looks really cool. Like there was just a lot of really cool smaller games that just kind of seemed like they'd be up my alley, and love indie games. And so it was, and also it just was another like out of all these showcases that we've been watching, especially we haven't really gotten to the bad ones. This I thought again was like a well produced one that moved fast and had just like a lot of cool fun games.
Yeah. Was there anything else on Friday, or do we at that point do we go on to Saturday?
I think that was it. Honestly, I think it was just those two because Cock Media or whatever was Saturday, right?
No, no, Coke. Yeah, Koch, Coke Media, whatever that
I
was.
know. Yeah, I don't
That
remember
was
what it is.
that was
Yeah.
Friday night too, and yeah, that was what, like
Okay.
2 hours
Terrible.
of. Yeah, I didn't watch that one, but everybody was
Mm.
basically like, oh, these people do not know what an E3 conference is.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one I did not sit down and watch. Outside of like
And
hearing people talk about it.
I watched part of it and I didn't watch it live. So I went in with everybody being like, this is awful. And I was like, and even I watched the kind of funny reaction archive to it on YouTube.
Hmm.
And even their thumbnail says like awful. And then the
Yeah.
text says like, do not watch
Yeah.
this video. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I was like, and I was the guy that like clicked on it. And I was like, how could it be? And I made it like part way through. I didn't even make it a third of the way through. And I'm like, yeah, this is legitimately just like a terrible conference with like a 10-minute like Zoom call interview about a game with no footage or anything. And I'm just like, yeah, it's like you don't really get the vibe of what this is. Especially, it's funny that that's also like the longest conference we've gotten, and it has like not only like the least amount of content, but also just like not even content worth going over for that long. Like we had Starfield and Elden Ring, and we only got those for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was, but I saw somebody in the industry basically tweet out something to the effect of like, "Oh, I just realized this is more about trying to like entice people to come work at our studio on these games.
Mm,
It's one of those conferences." And somebody else
hmm.
basically likened it to like, yeah, it's that is like the GDC pitch for, hey, like come, like if recruiters come to you asking to move and work on our games, here's the selling points, and here's to give you like the ideas behind it and stuff. It should not have been a like consumer facing kind of presentation. And that
Yeah.
was that clearly, like, those lines got crossed. And we'll see, I guess, moving forward, if they learn the lessons from that, or if they come back next year, try it again or something like that. But yeah, the gist that I definitely got was like, yeah, this was not like it's unfortunate, because it's like, oh, these deep dives or developer conversations are something that I think often we talk about, like wanting to see more of that, wanting to put developer faces behind these games and stuff. But not this is just not the right context for that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Those are the kind of things that, like, oh yeah, like those would be appropriate as like developer blogs or something like that, not as like a E3 package of like, hey, this is when all eyes are on the industry, so you want to like get all eyes looking at you and paying attention to you, and having something to say. And when you go out and do this, it's missing the mark. So yeah, that was Friday.
I think that's totally true. And honestly, if anything, I could even respect that if more if it was like, hey, we had our quick show and we're gonna have like a live stream going all day where we're gonna be talking to these people. Like, here's the channel, come watch. Like,
Yeah.
but clearly they're not that up on it to understand. Like, that's the kind of thing you should be doing. Like,
Yeah, if it had been, because they were also featured in the Summer Game Fest earlier that day or whatever, so it was like, okay, here's the 12 games that we're working on, and then if it had been like a stay tuned after the show for conversations with developers on the stage of development or the ideas they have behind these games or something like that. But like it's just about setting the right expectations for what it is.
yeah,
And I don't, it sounds like they didn't really do that. They got caught up in the like, oh, we're gonna have a slot on E3, or like they are the epitome of like, E3 needs people to fill their space, and these people were like, oh, like all eyes are on E3, so yeah, we'll go ahead and take that space. We'll go ahead and take up that space, even if they didn't really have something to say. And E3 was just
Mhm.
like, sure, give us your money, and we'll give you the exhibitor space for it and the timing of it and all that stuff. And so yeah, it was unfortunate. That was that combined with I think some of the stuff we'll talk about here in like Saturday and day two and stuff like that are why I tweeted out effectively like last year we clearly did without E3, like
Mhm.
and the industry, you know, existed, it moved on, or it figured out workarounds with everybody doing their own things a lot of the time. And this year is very much like cementing that like I don't think we need E3 with the ESA.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it's nice to have a point in time where like all eyes are going to be on the industry or something like that, but the ESA is like actively making that worse by
Mhm.
what they're doing and how they're handling all this stuff. I think, and yeah, it was very like clearly we've like some of the shows that we will discuss didn't really have anything worth sharing and would have probably been better suited if they had waited 3 months and then done their own thing, separately outside of the E3 bubble, because like they're like we're just a lot of people are basically just talking about them with like ridicule and derision. So moving on to Saturday, and not like because the first one on Saturday was Ubisoft Forward, which wasn't terrible. It was
Mhm.
it was a Ubisoft conference.
Yeah.
That was the
And I
first
knew
one
this was
I really watched like with a focus on watching it, as opposed to with work stuff. But what were you gonna say?
sorry, because with Ubisoft, like I follow them so much, like I knew this was going to be a weak year, and like it's exactly like you said, it is a Ubisoft conference. We got everything we knew was going to be there, and it was like it hit all those standard formulas. But it was like one of those things where I knew going in, I'm like, this is going to be a weaker year because we already know Far Cry 6 is coming, and we already know like there's not going to be a new Assassin's Creed, like because that's too far out. Like within I didn't think we were going to get a Watch Dogs, like
Yeah,
so
it's
it was just
it's
like all that.
it's. I mean, within like a month last at the end of last year, we had Watch Dogs Legions, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Immortals Phoenix Rising all launch. So all three of those franchises are going to be on the back burner for a little bit, or they'll continue supporting them with like post launch DLC and stuff, and that's effectively what we got for Watch Dogs and for Assassin's Creed. But like we already knew those things were coming and in the pipeline. So yeah, the biggest new thing really from Ubisoft was the and it wasn't even new. It was just like, hey, we're finally ready to reveal the Tom Clancy's formerly Quarantine Now Extraction, right? I think
Mhm.
that's the name.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, because it's like it was Rainbow Six Quarantine, and now it's Rainbow Six
Extraction,
Extraction.
yeah, because it like quarantine. It was like, hey, let's after everybody has spent a year and plus in quarantine, maybe let's not go with that for a name. So they rebranded that like a little while ago, and they did a deep dive into it, and it's basically like Rainbow Six Siege but PVE mode instead of
Mhm.
PvP, and yeah, as somebody who like doesn't play but has like watched people play Rainbow Six Siege, I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's still not going to be my kind of thing because I'm not going to hop in and do co-op, with other people in Rainbow Six. But like, it's cool that that's now a standalone experience for people who want that kind of experience with the Rainbow Six Siege gameplay, I guess.
Yeah, because that gameplay is really good. Like I played Rainbow Six Siege a bit when it came out before a lot of the updates they've had now have come
Mm-hmm.
in. So I imagine it's even a way better game, although way more technically complex with all the. That's definitely one of the ones where if you don't know the operators and what you're doing and the layouts, like you're just gonna get destroyed, you know?
Yep.
But like I think that gameplay is really fun and it is its own thing, and I understand why most people wouldn't like it. And it's not my favorite thing in the world because I'm more of a Call of Duty run and gun kind of guy. But that slow kind of creeping around, take one bullet and you're out is kind of a cool thing. And I think that's kind of a cool to put in, like you said, like a PVE environment with your friends, and it's not just like doing these hardcore multiplayer ranked matches that you can just getting your teeth kicked in.
Yep. I think the other real big thing that they had was, of course, they closed with like the long in development Avatar game finally being announced, and I just like I look at that, I'm like, I don't know who this is for, like
It
who
looks so bad, right?
it.
Like, am I wild on that? Like, I just thought like this looks
I
bad.
mean, I like honestly, as soon as like they started showing off Avatar, I just started going in and updating our doc with like, well, here are the people who got the right predictions. So I didn't even really like pay attention to the Avatar trailer because I don't care about that game. People were
Yeah.
like, people afterwards were talking about how like, oh, it shows the hope and promise of the Snowdrop engine for the eventual Star Wars game that Massive is going to be working on. But yeah, like I mean it in the few seconds that I was like paying attention to it, I was like, okay, like I don't. It's hard to tell from a stream if this is going to look really good and all that stuff because compression, everything like that. But
Oh
also, I just
yeah.
don't care at all about the Avatar world, so I don't. I'm
Yeah.
so tuned out of this that I don't know. I can't necessarily put on it how it's going to look in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like I hope it looks good, and especially after hopping into like Jedi Fallen Order that just got the PS5 upgrade. Like I'm excited for a future where like I'm hopping in and playing next gen Star Wars experiences and stuff like that. And if that is this, fine, but it's definitely years away, especially if they're like if that team is working on Avatar and then another Division game and stuff like that. So it's like this does nothing for me. I don't know who the audience out there that is clamoring for even the Avatar movies that they've been working on and have committed to for a decade plus or whatever. It's like no, like Avatar, sure, highest grossing movie of all time or whatever until Endgame, and then now has taken the title back in a re-release and stuff. But it's like, but nobody liked that movie. It was a novelty
Yeah.
like for the 3D and stuff, and it is Fern Gully or like Dances with Wolves. It is such a bare bones basic story that like people aren't out there looking for like the next big Avatar thing. So I just don't know why this is a game that is getting so many resources here in in the 2020s for a 2022 release. It's like I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Have fun with it. It's going to be another Ubisoft open world kind of thing with the paint of Avatar. I'm so
But like,
I'm so checked out of that. I don't care.
but I'm 100% with you on all that, and because that's my thing is like as I've been saying, as I said earlier, and as I've been saying on all these other shows, is like I'm a huge Ubisoft guy. I play all these open world games just to go run and check off boxes, and some of them are great, and some of them aren't. This one is that with an avatar coat of paint, and that immediately I'm checked out. No, I'm not gonna buy. I'm not gonna play it. Like they lost me like from the get go because I pretty much agree with everything you said about Avatar. It's just I'm not interested in that world. I don't want to play a game in that universe. You
Yeah.
know?
One of the ones that I thought did have a really good showcase, and it's definitely not a me kind of game, but I think it's probably going to be a very you kind of game, is the Riders Republic, because like
Yeah,
that gave me so much in the way of like Tony Hawk vibes.
yeah,
That I think it's but like with winter sports and stuff like that. So I think
yeah,
it definitely seemed like something that, and I saw somebody else tweet out basically like this is what Steep should have been because Steep was their big multiplayer downhill snowboarding and stuff game from a couple years ago, and so yeah I definitely thought of you as I was watching that one. I was like, okay, not my kind of game, but it looks cool and looks really good. It looks like kind of a level of chaotic fun. So
It,
yeah.
that did look really cool. That was one that did stick out to me. I didn't get to finish the whole Ubisoft conference, but I did see Riders Republic, and like it does look really cool. And I know, like you said, it kind of hits that Tony Hawk vein. And I am also a huge fan of the SSX franchise, like the old SSX back when it was kind of great. So that's another one that's been long dead, and I would love for them to bring back. I don't think it's ever going to happen, especially because if they do, they're going to do it like how they did it before, where they're going to do like modern reboot. It's not going to be like SSX tricky, like that era of just fun games is dead, I guess. But like
Yeah.
this is something that, like you said, it can kind of come in and fill the place, and it seems like a little bit more dynamic with like all these different vehicles. And honestly, what even got me more was like those jet wingsuits.
Hmm.
Like I was like that even got me a little bit more interested than some of the other stuff going on. Where I was like, that just seems really cool. They'll just like fly down some of those mountains with the wingsuits, and if you can do like co-op with your friends, like
Yeah, which I mean, because like I've done that plenty in the Far Cry games where I've just gone like, okay, I'm gonna hop off the top of this mountain in, Far Cry 4 with the wingsuit on and just kind of like, be as big a daredevil as I can be and just like come as close to the ground as I can without hitting it. Or sometimes I hit it and then I die. So
me
yeah,
all the time.
exactly. I definitely saw that, and like So I was like, okay, yeah, you're showing this off in a trailer. I imagine it's like in real life when people are playing this, it's going to look way more like Fall Guys, and it's just going to be chaos and people running into each other. And what does that look like? Or do they just kind of like fly through each other and there isn't collision? Or yeah, so I'll be very curious to see how that all plays out. Really the biggest things that jumped out at me from Ubisoft were like the things that weren't there, like Beyond Good and
Hmm.
Evil. Still nothing
Yeah,
from Beyond Good and
God,
Evil because that game's just been in development nightmares. And then same with like Skull and Bones, like the fact that that game just has fallen off a map.
yeah,
And continues to not be seen. It's like at this point, just cancel the game. like it
right.
can't. There's no way with the amount of like time and resources you guys have put into it over 4 years, it's going to like recoup its investment,
Yeah.
unless it really hasn't been getting worked on and you've just been pulling that team off of it to work on, the latest Far Cry or whatever. Um, what did you
Which
did?
honestly could be happening because that's even what happened to the Need for Speed team.
Yeah,
Like it's not even that they were having troubling development. It's Battlefield was having troubling development, so they pulled the entire Need for Speed team to get Battlefield out. Like, which is crazy. But that's how the business works now. You know?
yeah. Did you? So you said you didn't like watch the whole thing. Did you get to the Far Cry villains part? Where they basically announced like as part of the DLC and the season pass stuff for Far Cry 6, there's going to be a game mode where you're playing as like the iconic villains of Far Cry, Voss and Pagan Min and Joseph Seed and maybe El Presidente Giancarlo Esposito. What I don't remember what his character's name is, but did you see that? What'd you think about that?
I didn't see all of that. I think that's right around where I stopped watching was during the Far Cry stuff. Even though it did look awesome.
Because it was like, well, we've already seen Far Cry stuff, and I mean, Far Cry has been in at least 3 conferences this weekend that I've seen, so it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
kind of overexposed a little bit. Far Cry.
No, I totally agree with that. And that's even one where like, because even especially for me, where they were like, we're doing Far Cry 6, and I'm like, all right, you got me. Like that's it, day one, I'll be there. So it's like, but then it's like when they just keep showing you and telling me all the stuff that's going to be there, it's like I get it, it's Far Cry, and then it looks like when they were running around in the gameplay, like I was kind of impressed because it looks super detailed. Like when they're running around on the streets and stuff, like everything looked like it was very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to dive in. But then yeah, that new mode, like that sounds interesting, and I'm wondering like how deep that'll be, or if it'll be like just kind of a weird like co-op side thing, or like multiplayer, or if it'll just be like a more full-fledged mode. But I mean, they really do like to bring like old stuff back like that sometimes, especially for like the multiplayer, where they'll be like, oh, you can be Boz or Pagan Min, or I can't think of others, and we, you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely seemed to be a. I mean, like a first-person experience of playing as those characters and getting like new story of those characters, like
Oh,
like
okay.
from
Yeah.
their perspective, like
Hmm.
before you encounter them, or maybe even while your
Battling
protagonist in
them.
those areas is, or actually, like now I think about it, because I definitely haven't like gone in and like looked into any of like the actual like write-ups or stuff, but like there was even the idea of like you're playing as these characters in some kind of like hell state or something like that, because like the one with Voss specifically sees like, was it Brody or whoever your protagonist is in Far Cry 3, like sees
Mm.
him as like a nightmare kind of character. He's like, haha, motherfucker, it's me or whatever. And he's like, and so like I got the impression a little bit of like it's them like having these nightmarish hell dreams or something like that. But yeah, it certainly intrigued me more than even Far Cry 6 is, just because I've always been out there talking about how like these villains aren't, like they're memorable, they have like these great moments, but you don't really spend a ton of time with them. And
Yeah.
so like this is kind of like a retort to that, and like, well, oh, you want more time with them, Trevor? Well, here's more time with them. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see if I actually sit down with it, because I have very little interest in playing Far Cry 6. It definitely not at launch. It's the kind of
Mm.
thing that like, oh, maybe 3 months after launch, when you guys are already selling it for half price, as you always
Yeah.
do, maybe then I'll
Yeah.
pick it up and be like, all right, yeah, sure, it's January now or whatever, and I'm looking for something to play. So while other people are playing, Dying Light or whatever, no, I guess Dying Light's December, but like, while people are playing the big January game of 2022, maybe that's when I'll hop into Far Cry 6 or something, and maybe check that out. They also announced that like Blood Dragon is going to be part of the season pass. Like if you buy the season pass, you're going to get Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, but they didn't
Oh, nice.
specify if it's like a remaster or anything, or if it's just like
Mm,
the original game. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Like it
yeah.
would benefit from a remaster, I'm sure. And even if it
Oh,
does, like
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure like the original doesn't look terrible, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely one of those like, well, that's confusing. Cool, like they because they teased it and were like, are they doing a Blood Dragon 2? That'd be interesting. And then yeah, it was
Yeah.
just like Far Cry, Blood Dragon, no remaster, and just it was like that's okay, weird. Um,
I'm excited for that though too, because that's something I do kind of like that they do for their like season passes or their pre-orders or whatever. Like I think it's part of the season pass where like they'll just give you a different Ubisoft game, but it's even if it's just like a remaster. So like I got Assassin's Creed 3 remaster and I got Far Cry 3 remastered, and it was just because I got the season pass for like Odyssey and
yep.
Origin or New Dawn or whatever. Like, and so that's going to be the thing of like I'll pick up the season pass for Far Cry 6, even though Far Cry 6 DLC or Far Cry DLC is never that great usually.
Hmm.
And like I'll pick it up and then they'll give me Blood Dragon and I'll go back and play Blood Dragon and like they got me. I don't know. Like I got to get out of this relationship with them.
Anything else Ubisoft wise you want to talk about?
I think that was honestly everything. I will throw out. I think we'll cover this more in the other show, but a disappointing no Rayman. Like that. I didn't think that we'd get one, but like that would have been a cool one. Like I like those Rayman games,
Yeah,
so
that
like
I guess
that
that
would have
is
been cool.
the other big like surprise was the Mario plus Rabbids sequel, which unfortunately like Nintendo leaked a few hours before the press conference. Weirdly, that and it was very reminiscent of like, hey, the original Mario plus Rabbids got leaked, and everybody's like, what the hell is this thing? This time we at least knew what to expect, but yeah, then it made its appearance as kind of a not it wasn't the one last thing that was the Avatar, but it was basically like the lead up to the one last thing. Um, and I really enjoyed the original game. Surprisingly, like I have zero relationship with. I mean, like I've played Rayman Legends, I think on Vita, a little
Mhm.
bit just because it was like a PS Plus game at some point. But I have like no relationship with the Rabbids, and so
Yeah,
I
same.
hopped into that game being like, well, if it's like Mario plus XCOM, I'll give it a shot, and ended up really enjoying it. And so if this is basically just kind of continuing that along, I like it's. I mean the core gameplay there is solid, so I can certainly get behind that. Um, so yeah, that was the other big like Ubisoft thing. Then from Ubisoft, I think we had Gearbox, which I think we
Mhm.
basically were talking about beforehand. Like Gearbox, one of those like just big swing and a miss.
Yep.
And I agree with a lot of like the kind of funny guys as well that like Coke Media didn't know better. They should
Mhm.
have known better. They didn't know better. So maybe they
They should
can
have
learn
paid
from
someone who
this.
knew better.
Like Gearbox knows better, and Gearbox gave a crap like presentation. It was terrible. Oh, I guess we skipped over. If you want to talk about Devolver, we could talk about Devolver as well.
Oh yeah. I didn't even. That was another one I started watching, and I ended up getting pulled away, so I didn't get to finish it. I have to go back to the archive. But that's another one that I am excited for because it seems like they have a lot of great stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, lots of cool games, and then their presentation is just always a good, fun, satirical takedown of whatever is big in the industry right now. And so this one was very much making fun of Ubisoft Plus and EA Originals or like EA Game like EA Plays Pass, Xbox Game Pass. It's basically like, hey, here's the subscription service. Google Stadia, Amazon Luna, all those things. It's basically poking fun of all those. Hey, it's free to sign up for the subscription service, and then you get access to premium purchases. Is basically what they were joking about the entire time. Which is even that is in and of itself like a dig at Disney Plus, where it's like, hey, you're buying the subscription, and then you have to pay a premium purchase price on top for some of these movies and stuff like that. So it was fun. They did a whole like merchandise on their store that was like tied into the presentation and including their own NFT because their take on the NFT was we're gonna take this whole presentation, we're going to record it on a VHS tape, and then we're gonna like break off the little tab so you can't copy over the tape. So it will be a non-fuckwithable tape, an NFT, a non-fuckwithable tape, and we're gonna sell that
Yeah, I
up.
want one.
we're gonna sell that tape, that one unique tape, up on the store. And yeah, by the time I got, like, because I was checking the Devolver Max Pass Plus or whatever website as the presentation was going, and by the time I got there, that videotape was sold out. So like, maybe, like, presumably if they actually held true to it, like, one person went on, bought that tape for $1,000, and now has that unique Devolver NFT, and just the funnest dumbest takedown of what they're doing over there. So really, like, it was a fun showcase. I don't know how many of those games I'll actually end up playing, but I always love just the energy that Devolver brings to E3 weeks,
Oh
because
yeah.
they're very much like the, like, angry kid rebelling against the machine, raging against the machine
Yeah.
of E3. Like, even going back to when E3 was a thing physically, they're never a part of E3. They book a parking lot outside of the convention center and do their stuff out there. So they're like E3 adjacent, but they're always like, fuck E3. Like, we're not going to pay ESA rates. We're going to do our own thing out here, and showcase indie games from our own title, as well as like others and stuff like that. So I appreciate that they just kind of have, like, turned that energy into their annual presentations. So yeah, back
Yeah.
to
I love them.
Gearbox. Gearbox was just like, we talked about this before we started recording. Like, half of the Gearbox presentation was just the opening and ending with Randy Pitchford on the Borderlands set, not showing us anything from Borderlands. So I lost a point in the predictions from there. And they even at one point say, like, they cover up, the actress playing Tiny Tina with an image of Tiny Tina, so we don't. They made a point to basically say, like, hey, this is her, but we can't show you her, so we're not going to show you her. So here's, Tiny Tina instead. And it's just like, this is the dumbest thing. And then it closes. He closed with, like, talking with Kevin Hart and stuff, and it was just like, why did this did not need to exist at all.
Yeah.
And then they're like, because there were multiple, like, interstitial things to Homeworld, which I'm like, you guys think, like, people care about Homeworld way more than they do. Because it was just like, they just kept coming back to, like, hey, here, Homeworld 3 is in development, and here's, why you should care about Homeworld. I was like, nobody cares about Homeworld, guys. And then I don't even remember what else they showed, like, just some, like, one or two other things that they showed off that was just like, okay, whatever. And they showed off the same Tiny Tina footage we'd already seen in the Summer Game Fest. So it was like,
Disappointing.
this half hour of my life is not, I'm not getting that back. That's annoying. So yeah, I was more like Blessing, and, like, I think even like Snowbike Mike and stuff over at Kind of Funny. Like, I was angrier about this because Gearbox has been through this before. They know what an E3
Yeah.
showcase should be, and they know what it means if you're going out there and you're saying, I'm going to do something at E3, and they crapped this thing out. It's like, you didn't have to do that. Like, you could have held that and just done your own presentation, a month from now, when you can actually show, tiny, like, Borderlands movie stuff, and tie that in, and like, it was I was angry. I was like, I already I have a strong disdain for Randy Pitchford, as many people do, because of just all
Mhm.
the nonsense that he's involved with over the years. And so spending so much damn time with him on this, I was just like, this is why I never watched the Gearbox panels at PAX, because I'm like, I
Yep.
don't want to sit through 30 minutes of Randy Pitchford just, like,
Doing magic.
stroking his own ego and stuff on stage. I don't care about that. So, yeah, I was very frustrated about that. Did you watch that one at all? Anything to add?
No, I skipped over that one, and I because I didn't going in, I didn't think there was be a ton there for me other than like the Tiny Tina thing, and I was like, that's just something I could catch later or not really get more content on. I don't need like a gameplay demo of that necessarily.
Oh yeah, that,
But
that was the,
then
that was the other thing. Like they were like, and Godfall is coming to PS4. So this thing that you touted as, like, it can only exist on next gen didn't sell well on next gen. So you're gonna try and, like, bolster your numbers by porting it back to the PS4, because apparently it can run on PS4. I was like, that doesn't bode well for this game.
I know, right? Well, that's the funny thing about Gearbox, and I don't even like. I'm not trying to just throw a bunch of whole shade against them, but it's like, other than Borderlands, they don't have like a
Yeah,
bunch of anything that's great. Like it's Duke Nukem and Forever, which is the bad Duke Nukem, and Aliens, Colonial Marines, and like
and
Godfall, and like
and Battleborn, yeah, it's like
yeah,
if you try and which is why I imagine they're sticking or they're doing this other game but keeping it in the Borderlands universe with Tiny Tina and stuff is like, yeah, they can probably see the track record of like, hey, our non-Borderlands things fail miserably, so let's just stick with Borderlands for a while and see how that goes. Or let's do Homeworld and try and get people excited for Homeworld. Yeah. So
it's
then
like the new Painkiller. That announcement that went
yeah.
totally flat.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, that's I don't know what that like. Even the Payday one, I was like, I don't care about Payday. Does Payday have a huge audience to like hang this this new publisher announcement around from the Summer Game Fest, whatever. Um, so then moving on to today as we're recording this, kicked off with the Microsoft and Bethesda showcase. So you watched that one. What'd you think of that about that one?
Yeah, I thought that was a great showcase. And that kind of probably then became like my favorite conference I've seen so far. And that was also one of the most, I don't know if I want to say like traditional E3, but that felt the most like an E3 conference of just like game, game, game. Like, I mean, Microsoft knows how to do this, and
Yeah.
and even with them working with Bethesda, like I think, like obviously we knew that acquisition was huge for them, but that's what I think bolstered that so much. And I know Bethesda didn't even have the biggest showing here, but even like one of the announcements that got me was when they announced that they were filling in the gaps of Game Pass.
Yep.
It's because when they announced all the Bethesda games, there was like 12 missing, and now they're like, or however many, and they're like, look, we got like all of them now, and then they even made the point of it's not just 15 games getting added, that goes to the larger catalog of 30 Bethesda games. And when you look at that, I'm like, Bethesda's and id Software and all that Arcane, like their entire back catalog is just on Game Pass for free. Really, my main takeaway from the Xbox showcase was Game Pass. Shit, like the value of Game Pass is just
Yeah.
exploded. Like so that there's just a lot of hype moments for me there.
Yeah, that was I basically tweeted out like 3 games in or whatever. I was like, okay, so they called this the or the Xbox and Bethesda conference, but really this is the like play it on day one with Game Pass conference because
Mhm.
the first the first 7 or 8 games were all like coming day one to Game Pass, including Starfield, which kicked things off with the not the 2/22/22 announcement that I was
Yeah,
hoping, but an 11/11/22 announcement date. So IOU Portillo's basically when you're in town because of our side bet on that one. Um, and that even that was like unfortunately like the trailer and that announcement leaked like
yeah,
an
that was
hour
leaked.
before the conference or something like that. So I was like, oh well, that's a bummer. But and they like and it's interesting in that they didn't have a ton to show on it.
Yeah,
Like it's in engine footage or whatever, but it was all still like a pretty much a introduction cinematic or something on the game. Like I still don't know
it
what the gameplay of that is going to feel like because it's a year and a half out.
yeah, because they have a like a David Cage in alpha like game like tech demo, and then it's like look at how cool we can make this, and then like but you're like yeah, but like what is the game from this? And I kind of get like we know it's a Bethesda like space RPG, we assume, so I feel like there's things we can just kind of assume,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm just like I really that's why I part of the reason I put in the prediction, I was like we have to get gameplay, right? And even if they're going to give it to us later, I'm just like, ooh, not 1 second of gameplay.
Yeah,
Like not one. Like
yeah,
that kind of that for me, that whole announcement I felt like kind of fell flat, which good they like opened with that
yeah,
and then like did everything else later.
yeah. Especially if that had been like the closer, it would have been like we've been waiting for years for that, and it would definitely would fall flat. Like I was talking before we started recording, I don't I definitely wasn't anticipating them to basically go as far out to November of next year for their release date
Mm.
because in recent years they've been doing what they did with like Fallout, where it's like, hey, like we're gonna hold the game until it's until we're ready to show it to you, and it's near due. So like I would have expected this. I expected maybe a February kind of release. Basically, like it's we haven't seen enough of it or heard enough about it to know it's coming in 2021. So 2022 makes sense. So let's have it there early 2022, and they can start showing stuff off. Like at this point, I would have rather they held it another year and just shown it, like done what they did with Fallout 4 at next year's E3 and basically been like, here's our big blowout. Here's what Starfield looks like. Here's Todd Howard talking about the game for 20 minutes and showing you gameplay and a trailer and all the different elements like we got with Fallout 4. And by the way, it's coming 11/11/22.
Yep.
Like that would have made like seemingly so much more sense. And I imagine this was probably there's probably like a business like Xbox kind of like, hey, we need to start showing results for like why this is our purchase, and doing that and basically saying Xbox exclusive is doing that. It is laying
Yeah.
out,
Oh, that was huge.
it is putting their flag in the ground on that one. But yeah, it's one of those like I am like I would love to like know what the parallel universe is like where they didn't merge. Would we have seen Starfield this year, or would it have been held back for another year, and we would have seen some of their other stuff? Admittedly, they didn't have a ton to show because most people don't have a ton to show right now after a year in quarantine and the development pains that has caused with people. But then yeah, like we saw, so that like kicked off the show, and then we saw then they went into like Stalker for like an overly long like presentation on that. And I was like, I don't care about any of this. And the whole thing's in Russian because it's set in like Chernobyl and stuff like that. And I was just like, this is a really weird thing to be like your number 2 showcase game. Okay.
It was also really loud for me. Like the when they were firing the guns and shit. Like I don't know what the audio mixing was because the stream I was watching, everything was fine, but then like it was so loud. Like I would like, and then I don't know why. I just thought that was weird. Where because it's again like you said, it's just gunshots and dudes and Russians and monsters and stuff. And I was like, this is weird.
But yeah, ultimately throughout that presentation, I think they showed off. I think with Redfall at the end, I think it was 31 games, and they basically were like, and like 27 of them or 28 of them with Redfall are coming day and date to Game Pass, including like the third part. Like the 3 that aren't are Far Cry 6, Battlefield 2042, and Diablo 2, Resurrected. Like those are the 3 games that they showed in this presentation that are not day and date on Game Pass. And yeah, it is absolutely like, yeah, Game Pass has great value. And I saw somebody tweet out like, they could have announced that they were doubling the price of Game Pass, and I'd still say it was the best value in gaming and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I mean that's fair.
Yeah,
Yakuza Like a Dragon
100%.
coming to Game Pass. So basically, the entirety of Yakuza is now on Game Pass.
Yeah, which I mean would have been great for us 6 months ago or whatever. But but that's still, I think again that's another one of those things. Yeah, exactly. I mean, now see that's the real when the real allegiances come out. But I'm with you there. But that's the thing is I'm just like that, and that's another like to me where I was like that's a huge boon for them. And I know Yakuza's already been on there for a while, but now again like a Dragon, that's a really recent game, and then they get to come out and say we have the entire series here for free on Game Pass, and then that's why like I really liked about a lot of those announcements, and even some of the smaller games like with like the update on Grounded, and it reminded me I was like, oh well, yeah, Grounded is really cool, and it looks like just from watching it looks like they've done a lot in like the last year. So I guess like of course it's a lot, it's not even finished, it's not even at 1.0 yet, but it's like they are updating that and then supporting that game, and that's really cool to see. But that's why I think that is a perfect Game Pass thing, like that's not that's why that is cool to see, and I can just go, oh, I can load up Game Pass right now and just dive back in, and if I want to play that update or if I just want to see how things have gone, that's there. And then the other game that kind of stood out to me the same way was it's like Shredders or whatever.
Yeah, Shredder.
It was
when that one started coming up, that one gave me SSX Tricky vibes, but like they clearly weren't doing like SSX music for it. So I was like, oh, it's a cool snowboard game, and I kept waiting for like the needle to drop and it to turn into like an SSX like game, and it never did. And I was like, oh, okay, well it's still like a cool multiplayer snowboarding game. Neat.
Yeah, because it looks really cool. It's just that's kind of when you get into that weird like Tony Hawk versus Skate and like SSX versus like Amped, which was like a more like there's just more serious takes on it, which is still fun, and that's why it's like a game I don't think I would buy it. Yeah, exactly. But it's like because it's like I don't think I would buy, especially because I don't think I would spend a ton of time with it, especially because it's the more realistic version. but Game Pass, like
Yeah.
I'll play it, and if it really hooks me, I could play it for forever. Like, that's where I their Game Pass I already know is a great value, and they're really just building up that value, and it kind of makes me just want to almost buy an Xbox now. Obviously, I still want a PS5, and that's my primary thing. Like I'm PlayStation here, want those trophies,
Hmm.
but there's just certain things where there's a lot of these smaller games where I'm like, man, it would be awesome just to pick up a controller and dive in and play around and just check shit out.
Yeah,
Um,
especially if that's like all you're planning on. The Series S out there for
mhm.
$300, way more available than PlayStation stuff seemingly at the moment anyway. Like that's that's basically like what you're gonna pay for if you want to buy a Switch or something. So it's like a great entry
Yeah,
point for next gen gaming. And like if you don't care too much about 4K, then you're set. You can play all these experiences with the better hardware on your Series S, and you get Game Pass, and yeah, you have like a ton of shit to play all the time.
yeah.
I was the same thing. Where it's like I've never been a Halo person. I've played the first
Mhm.
two games, and at some point I'll circle around and play through the rest of the series, probably in the lead up to Infinite. But like I wouldn't go out of my way to buy Infinite, but
Yeah,
I have Game Pass. I'll check it out on Game Pass. Same with like Psychonauts. I never played the first
yeah.
Psychonauts. I'm curious enough about Psychonauts, so maybe I'll check that out on Game Pass. But like, yeah, the for me, like the conference itself is like okay, like Starfield looks cool.
Hmm.
When we get that,
Underwhelming.
it's underwhelming, but I know what that game is going to be because I know Fallout and I know Skyrim. So eventually I can check those things out. Hell, maybe I'll even hop in and check out Fallout 76 at some point since they keep adding
Hmm.
stuff to that and keep continuing to support that game. Um,
That stuff did look kind of cool, honestly. Like it looks like they finally kind of get, I think, what it should have been from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. They still when they were like Fallout 76, like when Pete Hines is out there saying like Fallout 76 says all the things you love about a Fallout game, and he starts off with like camp building. I'm like that is not a thing people love about Fallout. And so it was the fact that it was like colorful characters weren't in there at launch, and it was just like PvP stuff. Like the fact that they realized that and kind of went in and added in NPCs to give you quests and stuff like that, I think makes that a much more appealing game, and it makes it much more in line with a Fallout 5 type experience. That yeah, I would just have to play with other people or whatever. That's like I can work around that, I guess,
Mhm.
if I want to hop into that experience. But yeah, like even that like if I hop in and play that on Game Pass, I'm not out anything extras. And so if I'm already subscribing to Game Pass for, X, Y, and Z other things. So it's a cool opportunity. And yeah, like you said, the fact that, the things that we're missing, the notable absences, like, the earlier Fallout games from Fallout 3 and even the PC ones they basically added into Game Pass. So like Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics, I think. And then like Dishonored Death of the Outsider, phenomenal arcane game that is now out there. So now all of the Dishonored games are on Game Pass. And then a handful of other things that I just didn't catch or know. But yeah, like the value of Game Pass is clearly what Microsoft continues to hammer home and make their big selling point. I'm trying to think if there were any like the Halo Infinite re-reveal,
Mhm.
like again doesn't
That's
do a ton
cool.
for me, but the multiplayer looked really cool, and it
You
like
did.
it was hitting on all of those like multiplayer like double kills
Yeah.
things that like I know of and I know people love about Halo multiplayer. So hopefully when they do a deeper dive into that, even if they don't dive into or go into the battle royale market like a lot of people might want them to, the fact that it's going to be free multiplayer for anybody, you don't need to buy the game,
Mhm.
you can just go and hop in and enjoy Halo multiplayer, is going to get a ton of people in there, I'm sure. So I thought that was an effective re-reveal, and I was surprised when that happened. Like 35 minutes into ostensibly a
Yeah.
90-minute showcase, I was like, okay, well if they've already hit Starfield and Halo, the big things we were expecting, what is going to close out the show? And then we get into near the end, like Forza Horizon 5, and Forza Horizon 5 gets a significant amount of time to show off the new elements, the Mexico setting, and looks gorgeous. Like I loved
Yeah.
especially all of the times they like start on a shot while they're talking about like a new biome or something like that. Mexico has this like incredible volcano or something like that, and then like the cars start driving in and you see that the whole thing is in game, and in engine footage and stuff like that. I was like, God, this game is going to look amazing. And I'm not a racing guy, but I hopped into Forza Horizon 4 on Game Pass, and especially when they did the Lego stuff, and loved it and had a great time with it. So like, hell yeah, I'm going to check out Forza Horizon 5 when that comes out and just spend a weekend driving around this beautiful, Mexican world that they've crafted around that game, especially since they're adding in like a first person or a first player campaign mode kind of thing to like go
Mhm.
explore specific areas of this world to help us determine where the festival should be taking place and stuff like that. I was like, that's a really cool thing to entice me to go check out the incredible landscapes and environments that they've created in this world. Because otherwise I did feel a little aimless, going around in Forza
Mhm.
Horizon. So if they're going to give me like, objectives to go and pursue that aren't just like do these drifting challenges and stuff like that, I'm super excited to hop in and check that out. And then they close out with Redfall,
Yeah,
a brand new game
which was a
from
little bit.
Arcane. Go ahead.
Sorry, that one was a little bit underwhelming for me. Like just as the big end cap. Like I know that has been a game from Arcane that had like been talked about for a little bit, but that was just one where I was like I don't know, like I like when it's like you hit the nail on the head where it's like when they put Halo so early in, I feel like it set this expectation for like
Are,
so there's gonna
are
be
Yeah,
something,
are we
and
going to
then
end with
like
a Gears? Are we going to end with the Indiana Jones? Are we going to end with Wolfenstein 3? And then it's like, nope, here's a new IP from Arcane. It's like, oh, okay, well that's like cool, and I love especially as a huge Dishonored fan, and somebody who's extremely excited for Deathloop. And I love that they did not like they to our conversation on that news you care about. Nope, no mention of Deathloop at all in the Bethesda conference. Um, but like I love that they're putting that much faith to give Arcane that spotlight. It's for me it's very exciting because I know even though I'm not getting a huge sense of like the moment to moment gameplay, like I can already
mm,
just in the cinematic trailer that they kind of show for that game, I'm like, oh okay, I can see how Dishonored powers will play into some of this stuff, and so I thought that was like for me as a huge Dishonored and Arcane fan, I thought that was really cool. But I also understand that like there weren't a ton of us, and that's kind of why they're moving on from Dishonored because people weren't playing those games. Um, so yeah,
and
it definitely if in your mind you were building it up to like a Gears reveal or an Indiana Jones reveal, that's definitely going to be a letdown from either of those.
yeah, and that was kind of my thing is because I love Arcane and like I love the Dishonored series and even the Prey didn't really
Prey,
do it for me. But I
yep.
still have like respect for Prey as being a really cool like game, and so that's where I'm like and that's why I am excited for Deathloop because I played Dishonored the wrong way where I play it very actiony and non-stealthy because I don't know, I just get impatient. And well, my point with Dishonored too is the gameplay was really, really, really good and fun. Even if you were just sword fighting and shooting with the gun, like it
Hmm.
felt incredible. So I liked getting into big fights that you're like weren't supposed to do. And then that's when they're like, "Hey, we're doing Deathloop, and we're taking this sweet gameplay and the way it flows, and we're putting it into an action context." So I think to your point there, you got me a little bit more excited about it. Where it's like, "Hey, if they can kind of do that same thing with like Dishonored and Deathloop and put that into another gameplay style, like that could be something really cool because like they
Yeah,
definitely do great gameplay."
yeah. Plus, like the like, I'm never I'm never gonna be out there being like, yes, I want more co-op experiences, but the fact that it is a co-op experience like is cool. I appreciate that it's being built as like a single player or co-op kind of thing. But if that is something that in 2 years time or whenever that comes out, like you, me, and Logan and Cam hop in and do like a 4 player co-op run of that kind of game or something like that, that could be a ton of fun. Like all four of us just run around with the nonsense combat stylings of an Arcane Studios kind of game. Um, Anything else from Microsoft Bethesda that you want to highlight?
The only thing, quick, because we did talk about Forza Horizon 5, I'm completely agree with you and everything you said, because I am an arcade racer guy, and I haven't been able to spend a ton of time with that series because a lot of it's been locked behind the Xbox One, which I have an Xbox One, I just like never turn it on,
Yep.
and that's a different conversation. But I just for 5 it does look amazing, and that's another thing where I'm like, man, just boot up Game Pass, pick up a controller, drive around, like perfect. And then the other one for me, I think you may have mentioned it earlier too, but like Psychonauts 2. Like I am a Psychonauts fan from the original. I played it later, like a couple years ago when it came to PS4, but I'm excited for the second one, especially because it looks like not only obviously is it more like modern, but it just looks like they really blew everything up, and the production value looks so much bigger, and it looks like they were really able to just do a lot of things that they were limited on the first time around.
Yeah, it definitely looks like they are benefiting. I mean, admittedly, I don't have that history with the series, but like they've clearly taken their time with it, and they've probably taken a good chunk of that like Microsoft funding to help make it the game that they want it to be, as opposed to the little studio that tries and does with Double Fine. Getting to push that stuff. Not as imminent as I was hoping, because I had of course predicted that we'd get
Mhm.
an out now kind of thing. But it's coming out in August. They gave us a release date of it, so it's it's right around the corner here. So not too much longer to wait, especially because that's one that like you've seen at like you went and saw that at one of the
Mhm.
PAXs, right? So it's been like
Yeah.
at the PAX circuit for years now, and it was always like, oh, you can see a demo, but you nobody was ever going hands on with it. So it's been one that like has been just like tantalizing for so long that I'm glad you're going to finally get a chance to check it out. And because that predates the the Microsoft thing, that will be coming to
Mhm.
other platforms.
And
Another
get
one
my trophies.
exactly. Another one on that vein that I want to give a shout out to was Hades coming day and date to
Yes.
Game Pass.
Yeah.
But as soon as that trailer came up, I was like, great, because that means if it's coming to Game Pass, the Switch exclusivity window is now up, and sure enough, they Supergiant announced, yep, it's coming to PlayStation 4 and 5, as well as Xbox on Game Pass and stuff. And
It,
and so I'm like, yep, that's great. Unfortunately, like I looked at their post, and it will not have the cross save support that the
yep.
Switch version and PC versions have. So I'm like, well, that's a bummer. But I'm also I'm perfectly content like taking, because like yes, ultimately like I can carry some stuff over, but it's also a roguelike. So like part of it is, hey, there's a ton of stuff that I couldn't carry over anyway. So it'll be
Yeah.
fun. It's admittedly never one I'm going to platinum, because Supergiant games are just notoriously difficult platinums, because it's like, hey, beat the game with all of the difficulty modifiers on, and I'm never going to do that. But I'll hop in there and spend some time with Zagreus again. So yeah, that was another one I wanted to give a shout out to. I was surprised we didn't see an update on Fall Guys in that same vein of like,
Mhm.
this is when Fall Guys is coming to Xbox and ostensibly Switch. I imagine maybe we'll see that in the Nintendo Switch
Oh, yeah.
direct in a couple days, because that's basically another one that's like right around the corner because of when it came out last year. But yeah, I think that's it for Microsoft Bethesda. I One of the things I'm also curious about will be in future years if they still brand it as Microsoft Bethesda, or if this was just like a one-time thing because of the merger being such a big thing, and there being enough Bethesda studios that they could highlight both. Because I feel like
Mhm.
in the future it'll just be like, here's the Xbox conference, and yeah, you'll still have like Pete Hines and Todd Howard come out and talk about the games they're working on, but it'll also be showcasing what Machine Games is working on, and it's not going to be billed as a separate like Bethesda thing, in the same way that like it's not the Microsoft 343 Studios conference or something like that to show off like, hey, here's the Halo thing we're doing. They're just Microsoft Studios now. So I'll be curious to see if they like what they do with the branding next year, as we continue on. So then I think the last one we'll talk about as of where we're recording right now is going to be the Square Enix one. Um,
Mhm.
so what did you think of Square Enix? Did you watch the Square Enix one, or was that one that you just haven't got around to?
This was another one I only got through part of, and this was one that I kind of also just lost interest in.
Yeah.
Like when this was just me, and because like there is stuff that Square has that I'm interested in. It was just not here at
Hmm.
this conference, really, and that was just me. And I know like there was a little bit of Avengers with like the War for Wakanda finally, which is cool to see because we know they kind of had to delay that for obvious reasons. And then there was even like I know, but even like we talked about, like there was no Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's no Final Fantasy like 16. I think you said got like the sizzle reel.
Yeah, there was like
And
a sizzle reel that got like a whole bunch of like, here are the games that are out now, and then here are the games that are coming in the future, and that was where we saw like those things that weren't getting like the real spotlight today. And that's so yeah, that's where like Final Fantasy VII Remake was in like the out now section, and then 16 was in the like here's what's to come. But yeah, it was. I mean, it was another one that I thought a lot of people are comparing it to the Gearbox one, and that like in the levels of disappointment and frustration with it. I thought with Square Enix they at least prepared us for
Mhm.
what this was going to be, because they basically came out and said, you know, we're going to have a debut from Square Enix from Eidos Montreal, which ended up being the Guardians of the Galaxy game,
Which is cool.
which got a meaty look in this. I want to say it was like a third of the presentation time was basically devoted to debuting this Guardians of the Galaxy game that has been like long rumored and long in development, and it's coming out in August or October or something. Like, it's coming out before the end of the year, so they really got to, you know, hit the ground running on marketing that one. Um, so that was basically what came out the gate, and then they basically said like, and we're also going to have, you know, a True Colors update, we're going to have a Babylon Falls update, and we're going to have an update on Avengers. And outside of that, they had like a couple new announcements, like the Final Fantasy Origins, you know, Koei Tecmo game or whatever that they're working on. I don't remember what the ultimate name they ended up giving it, but it leaked a couple weeks ago as like, you know, this weird hack and slash approach to the Final Fantasy One storyline. Didn't do anything for me. I look at that, I'm like, this just looks dumb. I have
Is
zero
that a
interest in this.
particular?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I have zero interest in hopping into a game like that, for the Final Fantasy One storyline. What were you gonna say?
Well, that was my kind of my question there does Final Fantasy One even have like a particularly notable or like good story? Like I know it has one. I just like haven't. Wouldn't you think like six, seven, I don't know, eight, nine, 10, something like that? Like
I mean, it's a very
if you
generic
wanted a
like
story,
the
yeah.
heroes of light going against, you know, this bad guy and evil chaos and stuff like that. So it's like they can build a different story around it in a very like, I mean, there's not people that are going to be like, well, this doesn't abide by the lore of like. I went out and tweeted like the closest thing that you'll get to that, which is like this guy's running around with like a Henley T-shirt, so that doesn't really fit the fantasy aesthetic of the original Final Fantasy. So what does that mean, or what's that? So like, what's that? Like, it is a Final Fantasy 15 looking character now
Mm,
being set against the Final Fantasy 1, which was
mm,
it really did like build into the fantasy, and that's where you have black mages and red mages wearing like the, you know, iconic, you know, attire and robes and stuff like that of that era. So it's like, I don't understand what this, you know, 2021 dude bro is supposed to be doing, going up against a knight in like very, you know, metallic armor and stuff like that. It's like, and he's got like a giant sword on his back, as you do if you're a Final Fantasy. And the other joke I made was just the overabundance of the word chaos in this trailer. So I joked the idea of like, okay, here's a challenge for Nomura: work on a game that doesn't overuse the word chaos or the word darkness. Go. So yeah, like that was a weird thing. Um, but like I didn't I, and the other big like disappointing announcement that we talked about a little before we started recording was the idea that like they came out and they're like, you know, here are the games that started it all: Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like all in one collection. And like I'm sitting there, I'm finally excited. I'm like, oh my god, it's real! Like me and John Phipps, aka at is it Japan? No, Game Dad JP, formerly Mr. Negative. Like me and him are the biggest Final Fantasy VI fans I know, in any kind of like personal context, and like this is something we'd love and we've been clamoring for years, and so it's like we're finally getting like, give it to me on Switch, give it to me on, you know, modern consoles, whatever, I don't care. And it's like Steam/mobile. I'm like, no, this is, nobody wants this. Why are you doing this? This is the least amount of work to give these games out. And sure, I'm sure the idea is like, well, we'll do it for there, and then if there's like a demand, we'll put it on console. It's like, you know, there's a demand already. The
yeah.
demand is on console. you're just doing a Steam and mobile port because those are the easiest versions of this to do with the least amount of other work and working with partners and certain stuff like that. So it's like I hate that so much. I likened it to, before we started recording, I likened it to at the original, the very first PlayStation experience. They were like, it's been years, and they start doing like Final Fantasy VII, and like the whole thing is like building up to a Final Fantasy VII remaster or something like that, and it just is like, oh, it ended with like the big wet fart of like, hey, it's the port of the Steam game of Final Fantasy VII, and they would eventually make good and basically, go to ground and come up with Final Fantasy VII Remake and announce that a couple years later. But it was like the biggest Square Enix troll possible in front of like that diehard PlayStation crowd, and this just felt like another one of those. Like, people are getting excited about this thing, and then they rip the rug out from under you, and it's like Steam/mobile in like the most Arial font text on the splash screen. It's just like, what the hell is this? I was annoyed by that. That bothered me a lot. Anything to add on that one?
We just have to hold out hope that they'll will do like you said, and finally just bring it over to like PS4 and Xbox and all that, and like maybe this could even be one of those wild things where it's like on Game Pass,
I mean,
like where like
absolutely. Like, I mean, Final Fantasy, much like Yakuza, they've been going nuts getting Final Fantasy games on Game Pass. Again, like, Xbox realizes that their shortcoming has been JRPGs, so they're really trying to bring in that audience and say like, hey, Final Fantasy VII Remake, not remake. I imagine when Final Fantasy VII Remake finally makes its way over to Xbox and the exclusivity over PlayStation is done, like, I can imagine it'll be like, hey, we're bringing it to Game Pass. Here's another reason for you to buy Game Pass, because Final Fantasy VII, like, the non-remake version, Final Fantasy VII 8 remaster, Final Fantasy VII not or Final Fantasy VII 8, Final Fantasy VII 8 and 9 are all on Game Pass or have been on Game Pass recently. I think some of them are like terming out and stuff like that. But like 12 is on Game Pass. 10 and 10.2 were on Game Pass for a while there. So like, yeah, this absolutely strikes me as the kind of thing of like, yeah, it's gonna be on Game Pass day one for the JRPG fans in the Xbox family. Here you go, enjoy, revisit these classic games, and so yeah,
never before on an Xbox platform, I
exactly,
believe.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's like they're perfectly primed for that, and the fact that Square Enix just comes out and says like, hey, here you go, it's on the two platforms you don't really want it on if you're a Final Fantasy fan who has been a Final Fantasy fan for life. Like, yeah, I'm sure a handful of people are fine and happy to play those games on console or on their phones. And certainly it will probably be a better deal than you can currently get on phones, because those like, Square Enix notoriously charges like $20 for these games on mobile and stuff like that. It's just like, that is not what that marketplace is. What are you doing? Yeah. But I do have, because at one point I was looking at the idea of doing for that nerdy site, doing like I'm going to play through all the Final Fantasy games. I do have Final Fantasy II on my phone. I'm pulling up right here, because that was like the only way to go out and pick it up. There's the music. Go ahead and like cut that before we get like copyright claimed on this episode. But yeah, I basically went through and I was like, okay, well, like, without replugging in my PS3 where I could go through, because like I have the ports from the original PlayStation or whatever, which I could play on a PS3
because there was
console.
a demand there.
I mean, like, it was close enough. Well, because the PlayStation is where Final Fantasy went to after the Super Nintendo. Like, yeah, they brought on, they had Final Fantasy Origins, which was a collection of Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on PS1. They had Final Fantasy Chronicles, which was Final Fantasy I think 6 and Chrono Trigger. And then they had it was 4 and what was it? There was one that was Chronicles. There was Anthology and there was Chronicles. One of them was like 4 and 5, and then the other was like 6 and Chrono Trigger. I think Anthology was 4 and 5, and then Chronicles was Chrono Trigger. But so it was basically like, hey, here are like you could play on the original PlayStation 1 all Final Fantasies up through 9 with the exception of Final Fantasy 3. I think that was the one that did not get re-released stateside until like the DS up or like remake or something years later. So basically I was going through and like trying to figure out on a modern platform without, spending an arm and a leg to get a PS Now to go back and play those old PlayStation 1 games, where could I play all of these games? And like a lot of them, yeah, you can already get through Steam or Final Fantasy 2. I can get on my phone and I figured out how I would stream a game to from my phone to PC. I figured out all that capture stuff if I wanted to do that. Ultimately, I'm not going to do that anytime soon because it's a fucking shit ton of time to play through 15 plus Final Fantasy games when you get into like the 13, 13.2, 13.3 and 10, 10.2, all those things. So but it's like this would be a great like, hey, people want to play those original games all in one place, would be great to do on modern systems, and you put them out in the laziest way possible where people actually aren't looking for them. That's like, I'm annoyed by that. So that was frustrating. And I've since tweeted out like, the more I look at that announcement, the more more annoyed I get by it. Similar to talking about it. What did you think of the Guardians of the Galaxy?
I think it looks kind of cool. It didn't blow me away, honestly. And I don't know if that was just me. I haven't really heard a lot of other people's reactions on it, so I don't know like where a lot of other people are at. But like it is just as the concept for a game, it has me very interested. And just from what I saw, I'm still interested in picking it up and playing it and giving it a shot. But it's like, or just like again, even just the concept is really just what has me because it's kind of the reverse of what we talked about with Avatar, where they go, it's Avatar, and I go, no, thank you, and
Yeah.
then they go, but it's Guardians, and I go, oh, okay, you got me. Like, I'll give this a shot. Like,
Yeah, for me with the Guardians one, especially like from the opening trailer they did, I was like, okay, so it's not supposed to be like the movie, but they're hitting so many of the same notes of the movie and so many of the same jokes and character beats of the movie that I'm just like, I don't like. You say it's not about the movie and it's not about like recreating the movie, but clearly, like so much of what you're showing just has the movie vibe, including going back to like 80s music and stuff like that to for some like the hey, when the team is hits a special power up move or something, we're gonna play song from Dirty Dancing or whatever. Like I was like, I like one of the big issues people had with Avengers was
right,
immediately comparing it to the MCU Avengers, and this just seems to be continuing that. It's like everything you're doing here, like you're clearly setting these up to be their own characters through the character models and designs and stuff like that, but you're clearly basing so much of this on what James Gunn did with these characters that I don't know how like to not compare the two.
yeah.
Like just hitting the same beats and same jokes with so many of these characters that I was just like, I just don't know. Like the gameplay is the thing that interests me the most. The fact that they were like, it's a single player experience, and you are playing as Peter, but you can control your other team members in combat, and you can kind of like give them commands, a la a Final Fantasy VII remake or something like that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm interested to see what that looks like. And then they showed the combat, and I was like, I'm a little underwhelmed by this. Like, it's not
Mhm.
doing anything that really jumped out as like incredibly cool. And maybe there will be like team up moves or something like that that like helps alleviate that or helps make that a cooler experience. But right now, it just kind of felt like, okay, at some point I can tell Drax to do something, I can tell Rocket to do something, or I can be shooting these characters. I'll be curious to see how that feels in the end scheme of things. I do appreciate, or I'm interested in the Telltale esque like
Mhm.
narrative design. It seems where it is like, okay, like your choices are going to matter. Do you want to sell Rocket or do you want to sell Groot to this this character or something like that? What does that look like if you do these different options? So like I'm definitely intrigued by the game. So it wins points in that regard. But there were just a lot of things where I was like, it it just gave me such Avengers vibes in terms of like
Yeah.
its introduction to the world and like the first, is it making the first impression that they wanted it to be making? And
Yeah.
I don't know if it did. Like I'll certainly check it out. Because yeah, I'm interested in those characters and what the story and the combat's going to look like. And I appreciate that it's avoiding what the Avengers did of like, hey, no, this is a single player only game. We're not trying to do like a live service component as well. It is single player only. Go on this adventure with these characters and create your own story. So it's like part Mass Effect, part
Mhm.
Avengers combat, part Final Fantasy VII Remake combat. I don't know. So I'm interested to see that one. Yeah, that of what they showed off, that's the thing that I'm certainly most interested in myself. And I say that as like
Same.
the Avengers guy. Like War for Wakanda, I'm like, yeah, I'll hop in and play that for a couple days maybe, to see
A
what that
day
story
too.
is. But like at this point, like there's no reason for me to stick with that game in any kind of regularity. So like I'll do what I did with Hawkeye, where I hop in, I play the new thing, I get the experience, and then I bounce. I'm like I don't care about the cosmetics or anything like that. There's nothing for me to chase. I'm not interested in like Destiny burned me, and then like
Mhm.
Avengers reburned me, where it's like there's too much other things to play. I'm gonna go experience those other stories as opposed to doing the same missions in this over and over again just to grind something out. So
Yep.
that's kind of where I fall with Avengers. I was surprised they still haven't shown Spider-Man, so I imagine the
Hmm.
PlayStation audience is getting frustrated and irked by that. Of like, hey, like this was a selling point you promised us, and you're not going to give it to it. Like by the time you give this to us, nobody's going to be playing this game anymore. What the hell?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's I'm sure disappointing to people. Are you gonna hop into the True Colors Life is Strange? Are you a Life is Strange
Probably.
person?
I played the first one. I haven't played. How many have they done at this point? Because they did the second one,
They
and
did Life
then
is Strange,
was
Life
that
is
other
Strange.
one they did a spinoff?
So they did Life is Strange 2, and then Deck 9, the people who were doing True Colors, did Life is Strange
Hmm.
Before the Storm. And then
Okay, yeah.
Don't Nod did Tell Me Why, as an Xbox exclusive, which is Life is Strange like, but it does not exist in the Life is Strange canon of things. So yeah, basically there's currently three Life is Strange games. True Colors will be the fourth.
So I played the first one, and like I didn't I liked it, but like I didn't love it, and it didn't I just don't have like a huge attachment to the series or like that world or that story. But I'm not opposed to diving in and checking that out, or even some of the other stories they've been telling with like the sequel and like like what you just mentioned. Because I mean I'm always down for those narrative kind of games, and even like these I like the older style adventure games too, like I talk about like the Tim Schafer kind, but I do enjoy these like modern adventure games where you can just kind of walk around and you just kind of get a cool story and solve some puzzles. So I'm not opposed to like going in and checking those out. It's just like so far down on the list.
Yeah, that's fair. It's definitely one like I always love the storytelling in these kinds of games. I did not play
Mm.
Before the Storm, so I've not seen what like Tech Nine's story or Deck Nine, um, Deck Nine. I've not seen what their version of storytelling looks like. This one, I'm more inclined because Ryan Clements also worked on this. Like this is the game Ryan Clements was
Oh, well,
working
that's
on for
awesome.
for the longest time, formerly of Podcast Beyond and PlayStation Blog and stuff like that. So like I'll probably give this one a shot just to check out and I might also I'm tempted to also check out the remastered collection of Life is Strange because that is the first game and the Before the Storm prequel,
Hmm.
which Deck Nine had done. So it would give me a chance to basically like check out their first foray into the Life is Strange world as well as the new one. Because yeah, I always enjoy like the way those stories put me into somebody else's shoes and like really do a great job of giving me an experience that I don't otherwise have or wouldn't otherwise have. In particular, like the Life is Strange 2, I thought was very impactful for me as somebody who's lived here in Arizona my entire life, but putting me in the shoes of Hispanic brothers that live in like Oregon and are dealing with the racism and all that shit. It's like, oh yeah, I'd like, and it's got to be times 100 down here in Arizona.
Hmm.
What Hispanic people are dealing with around me. So So yeah, like it just it gave me that like walking a mile in somebody else's shoes feeling, where I was just like I was fed up with any white guy I was encountering in those games because they were always just being super racist, and I was like, fuck all of you guys, like these kids aren't a problem. Like what the hell are you? Like, argh. So yeah, I don't know if the story that they're telling in True Colors is going to be as like politically hot button kind of thing, but I'll certainly be interested to see where that goes. Anything else E3 related, or are we kind of hit on everything? Do you think?
I think we pretty much hit on everything for me. That at least E3 wise for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, then, as we are an hour and a half in, maybe we'll
Hmm.
kind of speed through a couple of these other things. But I did want to talk about real quickly. I went and saw In the Heights. It was the first time for me going back to a movie theater. You can also watch it now on HBO Max, but I basically have been looking to go back to Alamo recently, and so this was like a perfect for me first foray back into theater. And honestly, like definitely watch it if you have HBO Max, but also if
Hmm.
you're comfortable and can get to a movie theater, this is a great movie musical to be experienced on the big screen. They do a great job. There's a lot of incredibly big, wonderful moments. For me, my experience of going back and it being my first, as somebody who, you know, got really into going to movies with Movie Pass, and then like right before everything shut down, Alamo finally released their season pass feature here that was basically Movie Pass, but for the Alamo, and so I got to start using that like a few times before things all just crapped out. But I've gotten really into going to movies pre-quarantine, and and so it was a really, especially at the Alamo, and so it was really like weirdly powerful experience going back for the first time. And in particular, they did kind of a like before like they always do like kick off the movie with like you are now entering a quiet zone. This is a no talk, no text. Like take your phone, move it away. If you violate these rules, you will get one warning, and then we will kick you out. They kind of do like a whole spiel, and then they go into like the every theater chain has their kind of like intro thing. And for Alamo, it used to just be like, After Effects graphics or something like that into Alamo Drafthouse. And there's like a little jingle or whatever that plays with it. And for this, or for now, it is like a whole bunch of pictures of audiences in the theater, either just from their own events or from movie parties or from like special events where they have actors coming in doing Q&As and stuff like that. And so it's just like a slideshow real quick of like all these people enjoying movies and stuff like that. And from like that moment I started tearing up, and then like I pretty much had tears in my eyes for most of In the Heights because it's already a beautiful musical. I've loved it for many many years. As a former theater person, it was like I went back. I have loved it at least since September of 2012 because that is when I bought the original Broadway cast album through Amazon. I found that order alongside the original Avengers movie. I bought that on DVD or Blu-ray in the same order. And I probably had already loved the show and the music before that. So long before Hamilton, I was a fan of In the Heights, and getting to see it on the big screen was just an incredible thing, especially for the diversity and the representation that movie has. It is a very Latino cast. African Americans are in there. It is Washington Heights, which is not white guys.
Hmm.
So getting to see that, and especially John Chu directed it, who also did Crazy Rich Asians. So like he like, and I felt very similar walking out of that movie when I saw that a few years ago. Like that was really cool as a not like as a white guy that is not like this is not speaking directly to me. It's still telling an incredible story that I can still pull stuff out of. But like imagine being the young Latina Latinx person watching this and seeing this kind of representation on screen for the first time is a powerful experience, and I
Hmm.
love that. I love that that's out there for people now. and the music's great. The dancing is the dancing choreography again great. Big spectacle moments and stuff throughout here, while also having like the really heartfelt like intimate scenes and moments between a lot of characters. Um, and I tweeted out after I saw it basically like they cut a couple of my favorite songs from the show, unfortunately, because
Mm.
you just have that happen in adaptations and stuff like that. But even with those numbers cut, it still is an incredibly beautiful story, incredibly well told. And like as somebody who knows the story, it still found ways to surprise me in cool and interesting ways. So I love that. I came home and watched it, at least once or twice again throughout the rest of this weekend. It is something that I will continue to, especially in this like first month where it's available on HBO Max. I'm tempted. I'll probably go try and see it in theaters again before it leaves, but I'll also be watching it regularly here in my own home, just because it's a fun, joyous celebration of that culture and that time. Has wonderful little like nods to Hamilton, as well as a fun little cameo slash nod to the original In the Heights casting and stuff like that. That was a ton of fun that I have. It has I tweeted this out. It has a post credit sequence or post credit scene. So if you do watch it, remember to stay for that. That's a fun little payoff to a thing set up earlier in the film. So yeah, In the Heights, phenomenal. I was moved multiple times throughout, including like including just being back in the movie theater was a wonderful experience. So definitely check out In the Heights on the big screen if you can, if it's safe for you to do so. But if not, it's on HBO Max. Go check it out there because it's a very special show. I think that I hope gets a lot of acclaim and a lot of buzz and a lot of celebration because it's real good. So with that said, I'll throw it back over to you because you have been finally sitting down with Final Fantasy VII Remake. So tell me a little bit about your time with that game so far, Frank. Because you were playing, to be clear, you were playing the PS4 version because you do not yet have a
Mm.
PS5. So what do you think?
I've been really liking it so far. I'm still really early in, especially for God. I mean, not only is that game a long game, that is only like disc one of a longer
Not
series.
not
So,
even disc one. It is the original game. You can probably do Midgar in 5 to 10 hours, and
mm,
and the first disc like has you leave Midgar and then go around the rest of the world for another 25 hours at least. So yeah, it's a it's not an unsubstantial chunk of the story, especially because like some of the stuff on disc 2 and disc 3 is just like, hey, like disc 3 isn't a ton of like stuff plot wise, but it had to be its own disc because of just the state of the world and stuff at that point. And so like there's a whole bunch of stuff there. But yeah, it is taking, an opening segment of this game into its own 30 plus hour experience. It definitely like really stretches it out and adds a lot of extra stuff there to what was the original story. So
yeah, and that's why I'm really enjoying about it because I have not played the original Final Fantasy VII. I played it a little bit, but I have not beaten it all the way through, and not even really played it a lot. And I'm very familiar with it and the story, and even like the greater Final Fantasy VII story that spun off, like Advent Children, Dirge of Cerberus, Crisis Core. Like I'm very familiar with the whole series, including just specifically Seven. So I'm excited to finally like dive in and play it. But I have been really enjoying it. The action's incredible.
mm,
Like I know it's like it obviously looks incredible when you see it, but I was worried about it being more like RPG like than action like, where I come at this from more of the action side of like I Cry and like Kingdom Hearts and like I like the act and like Final Fantasy 15 played amazingly and that's what I really liked about it. Like so this is where like this game I could figured they could do it, but I was really worried like I don't know if I'll like the combat, but so far where I'm at, I'm already loving it because like Cloud feels amazing
mm-hmm.
of the customization you can even go in and do with not only like the materia but there's different items and weapons and stuff and they like you can really like kind of it feels like you could really build out like different builds and kind of try to build towards different things. At least that's I'm early but that's how it feels
Oh yeah,
because I
definitely.
know like
You
because
could
I
you could
already
definitely
started.
do like I'm gonna do really like strong attack stats and just hack and slash my way through this stuff, or you could equip something and really have a like a magic focus. So Cloud is going to be a super magic user or something. You can absolutely customize those builds.
No, and that's kind of where I'm at because like I've been dumping pretty much all my stuff into like attack and like sometimes defense or whatever. Like I've mainly like a like melee focused kind of like fighter, and because that's kind of even that's why the combat's great, all the aspects of it, but that's the part I really like about it. Like getting in there with Cloud, and then it feels so intuitive and fluid to flip over to a different character and then like queue up things in the command menu and then flip back over to Cloud and then just keep beating on whoever with like the sword like because that was another thing I was like, man, like I get it, it's like this idea of like, okay, so you'll have a whole party and they're all roaming around and you can just rotate between everyone and everybody has their like their ATB gauges going and it's just like I was like, I don't know if that's gonna like really work or like flow well, but so far from where I'm at, it feels incredible and it feels super fast and intuitive. And maybe a little bit of it is like the prior experience of like not the character swapping, but like the command menu is super similar from like Kingdom Hearts and like other past like entries. So it's like there's a lot of like just things there that are reminiscent of things I've already played, but that's why it feels so. It was super fast and easy to pick up, and that's why the combat was the really main thing I've been enjoying and why I've really been like when it opens up in Sector 7, I went and did all the side quests immediately. Like I was just running around doing side quests nonstop, and some of the side quests are totally dumb Final Fantasy, like go kill the rats out in the whatever, like.
Mm-hmm. Go
But
find the cats. Yeah.
yeah, oh god, yeah. But I did kind of like the running bit that Cloud their cats just don't like Cloud for some reason. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why this is a new thing they built in, but I was like, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I've really been loving those aspects of it, and obviously it's beautiful. But I have even been enjoying the story because obviously, like I know Final Fantasy VII has an amazing character and amazing characters, amazing world, and amazing story that I've even enjoyed from not even being somebody who's played the game. Like so but it's cool to now like be living those moments and like being in that world with those characters and it's all super well like acted, it's all the voice acting's amazing at least like I already like some of the characters, like I like Jesse a lot, like I like Tifa, like I know Barrett will like is cool but he'll probably grow on me more, like he's still like hard ass dude at the moment where I'm
Mm-hmm.
at like but like I do kind of like some of the characters that they have there, and because one of my problems with Final Fantasy 15 was the first Final Fantasy I dove in and played from like beginning to end, and I loved the combat and I loved some of the things they did in the game, but I from the being told your whole history of gaming about how amazing the story and like worlds of Final Fantasy are, and then you go into 15 and I was like, wow, like and I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who did like it. And I even watched the extended content, like the movie and the anime. Like I watched that stuff and it didn't help. Like
Yeah.
so like and I know other people out there may like it more, but I was like, but this is the reason I am liking this more is because it's like this has the characters, this has the story, this has the world, like this has the things I've heard about, but it is in like a modern, more fun context for me to go play through. Because also another thing is like the magic feels great. I upgraded my fire materia already, and like I love the idea of like just by you using weapons and magic, they just upgrade and get stronger, and like you can even still then take that materia and put it on someone else. Like
Yep.
I'm all about a lot of the and because that's a there's certain things I knew would grab me, like the world and the characters and the story, and sometimes even the combat. But I'm even getting deeper into like the materia and like do like I was doing the assesses stuff to get more materia, and that's stuff that I don't normally always do in games because it's like boring, it's not fun,
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's optional and you don't have to do it. But in this, I'm like diving way deep. And honestly, I kind of one of the regrets I have is I put it on easy because the only difficulty trophy is hard, and I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I put it on easy, but the game is so easy. Like I'm still very early. I know it will get harder and there's more bosses and stuff, but like I barely taking like I'm playing it well. I'm barely taking a ton of damage. They're giving me healing items like unbelievably. Like I'm 5 hours into the game and I have 50 potions. I have 20 high potions. I have like 10 ethers. I have 5 Phoenix Downs. And I was like, I am unstoppable right now. And I'm not even taking the damage to like equate needing to use this. I've used 2 potions like the
Yeah.
whole game,
Yeah.
and it was to top off my health. I wasn't even in danger,
Yeah. It was just
like, and I haven't
you
even
just
used
had
the
a little
cure
bit of a
spell.
red bar, and you were like, I don't like seeing that. I just need to fix this for OCD purposes.
Basically. And then there was one time I was about to do it, and then I went into a cutscene, and when I came out of the cutscene, it auto filled my health again, and I was like, great, didn't waste a potion.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, it's I don't I never I played a little bit of the game on easy, like when I was going through and like cleaning up some of the trophies in when I was going for the platinum last year. But like I for the most part I played on normal, and then and I've talked about this before. I actually like I loved the game on normal already, and then
Mhm.
playing it on hard mode for that other trophy and for like for the platinum. I didn't think I was gonna do it. I basically went through the game. I was like, oh, it sucks that I'm not gonna like probably get this platinum. But then
Mhm.
I basically got to. I was like, well, let me try playing through some of these chapters because it's basically like, oh, play through every chapter on hard mode or whatever. And I was like, there are a few in particular where I know like the boss fights are gonna be a big old pain in the butt. So if I can get through those ones, I might be okay. So let me start at the beginning and see how this feels and how this goes. And what playing through on hard mode really gave me an even more added appreciation for the combat and the strategy that has to go into that combat. Like for what you're talking about, for playing it on easy mode or even normal, like you can mostly just kind of hack and slash your way through there and use spells when you need to and stuff like that. Um, and playing on a hard mode, like you really have to use the assess material there to understand like what will make these enemies stagger, and so you can
Mhm.
like basically put like change your attack style to like get that stagger and then start really wailing on them and doing damage and like exploiting weaknesses and stuff like that. So like playing on hard mode gave me an even deeper appreciation for all of the layers of the combat mechanic, especially because one of the key features of hard mode is like you can't restore your like you can't use items and you can't restore your MP. So it really becomes like, okay, how am I going to like your MP will restore at the beginning of every chapter, um,
Mhm.
but like even if you sit on a bench, it'll restore your health, but it won't restore your MP or something like that. So it's like you have to really start thinking about, okay, well, when do I use materia versus when do I not, or when do I use like you start using abilities a lot more, and specifically abilities that will heal versus using cure or cura or curaga or whatever. So a lot of that like you just had to be a lot smarter about some of those things in hard mode specifically. But like yeah, playing on normal, especially if you're playing on easy, it's like you can just absolutely just go through and like press square and occasionally go into like Punisher mode and press triangle or something like that. But or like if you switch to Barrett and you just like hold square down and have him like just gun down somebody until overcharge is ready, and then you just like blast them with overcharge. I'm sure that's a ton of fun. Or as Tifa, just pummeling the crap out of people is a ton of fun too. So yeah, and that like even that is like I love how each of your main four characters feel different. Like Aerith is probably the weakest one for me, but even her, like
Mhm.
it's fun being at a distance and using her as like a ranged attacker or something like that, or using magic and or her abilities to like do damage to enemies. So yeah, like that absolutely you're touching on a lot of the same like beats and moments of what I loved about that. I hopped in myself, and there will be let's plays that go up on the channel this week because obviously Intergrade for Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade on PS5 came out this last week, as well as the Intermission DLC, which is the new Yuffie chapters that are available only as purchasable DLC, which I did not realize. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording. Um, so I hopped in and replayed like the first chapter of Final Fantasy VII to like just get a refresher of the controls and kind of get a feel for the combat and stuff, and just see how it looks on the PS5. And it looks gorgeous. It looked gorgeous on the PS4 too.
Yeah.
And then I've also hopped into like the beginning of the Yuffie stuff to kind of see what that's like. And even that, like, they add the Fort Condor, mini game into the Yuffie stuff, which was a separate mini game in the original game, and that's a ton of fun. It's still touching on a lot of the same kind of like style and ideas of it, and so it's just fun the way they're adapting the story to tell it in this format. Like even Yuffie as a character, you do not meet until a couple hours
Mhm.
after you've left Midgar in the original game. So the fact that like her stuff in this is like taking place in the middle of the story you're doing with Cloud and Tifa and Barrett, is interesting, and it's a fascinating like new approach, a new way of telling this story and introducing this character into the world of Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. I look forward to kind of hearing
Mhm.
your impressions as they continue to develop. How far in the game are you at this point?
I'm about 5 hours in, and we're about to leave to go to the Mako Reactor 5
Okay,
mission. Like, I'm at the point where we're about to leave Sector 7, and I just like saved and stopped playing.
okay. Uh, are you so you've already gone and done like the stuff where like Jessie goes to her house
Yeah,
and sees her family and stuff? Okay.
that was dope. Yeah, like that was a
Yeah,
whole
and
cool
that's like
sequence, and I love the motorcycle stuff. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
and so yeah, that like that whole side story, like something completely new, like that was not in the original game. You never like go up to the top to do anything with Jesse or whatever. The motorcycle stuff, is like an iconic like little mini game sequence where when you're leaving Midgar. So the fact that they kind of like added in there early in to kind of introduce you to those ideas and stuff. Even that like there's like throwbacks and callbacks to the original game, but in a much prettier, flashier style and stuff like that. So very cool. But yeah, I look forward to seeing how your journey with Final Fantasy VII continues. And I will once I've finished my thoughts on the intermission DLC. I'm sure I will share those as well here. But enjoying it so far, especially just like going back into the Sector 7 slums as Yuffie, and then like seeing the cast from like the main game, like because clearly you don't interact with them in the main game or whatever, so it's like seeing how that all kind of plays out in the little moments and stuff is fun, and how it slots into the grander story. I'm looking forward to continuing to see. The last little thing we'll dive into here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
is it all right? I'm sorry. Is it all right if I drop a bit early?
Oh,
I just have to go pick up my roommate, and like he said, he landed a bit ago, so I
oh,
just
oh,
need to
yeah.
go grab
No,
him.
no problem. I did not. Yeah, that's right. I forgot you had that, and yeah, we talked about E3 way longer than I thought we would. So yeah.
I'm sorry, that's my fault too.
No problem. So yeah, we will let you go. And actually, at this point, I think I'll just hold off Ratchet and Clank for next week. We can just kind of wrap up the show here.
I do want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I'll talk about it next week. I finished it yesterday. Had a great time with it. Got the platinum in it at like 2 in the morning and stuff. So really good overall. But yeah, we'll talk about it later. So that is going to do it for this episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Thank you, Frank, for joining me. You follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Frank, before we go?
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to the our That D Plus show. As I know, I think we've talked about a few times. We're still doing the summer of Star Wars. The last episode we just did was Empire Strikes Back. I was not able to make that episode, but it is still a great episode, and I will be returning for this week's episode, which should be Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
So I recommend everybody check that out.
Cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will echo that shout out for our Summer of Star Wars on D+. But also, as I said, Let's Plays on the channel this week will be Final Fantasy VII centric. So you'll basically have my first chapter of Final Fantasy VII Remake that's going to go up on Tuesday, and then on Thursday will be me playing the opening little bit of the Final Fantasy VII Yuffie stuff. So check that out on the channel this week, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, and maybe consider supporting us over on Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of the That Nerdy Site show. Thank you again for listening. Thank you, Frank, for joining me. Stay nerdy and be good to each other.